Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a vampire deck profile. So with the release of Vampire Voivode in the previous Ghost from the Past set, I'm really excited to bring you guys an update of this, because Voivode is a decent card for the deck and has very interesting aspects that it brings to this deck. I'm really excited to bring this one to you guys, because this deck is a really fun deck to play, and one of my favorite variants of zombies. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name in the description every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, or even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Vampire Voivode. So Vampire Voivode is a very interesting card for this deck. And what it does is if this card is normal summoned, you can target up to 2 monsters in your opponent's graveyard, and special summon those monsters to your field and defense position. Now, it does sound a little bit bad because you do have to normal summon this card to your side of the field. It's not a level 6 or a level 5, and it does have that little bit of a downside to it. But there's a lot of cards in this deck that help you normal summon this card out for free without having to tribute monsters, and so it's not a really big problem for the deck. It also has the ability that when a monster effect is activated, while a monster with the same name is in the graveyard, quick effect, you can negate the activation. And if a monster is special summoned from your opponent's graveyard, then you contribute 2 monsters to special summon this card from the graveyard, which is a pretty good effect just to be able to special summon it back to your side of the field and get it out from the graveyard. It's a really good card overall for the deck to help you go into Vampire Sheridan very easily, but it's an overall, you still have to tribute summon for it sometimes, which is why I play it as a 2-of in this build. We then play a single copy of Vampire Vamp. Vampire Vamp is pretty neat in this deck because she's kind of like Relinquished. She lets you once per turn win this card. When a card is normal summon, when a vampire monster is normal summon, then to your side of the field, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, whose attack is higher than this card's, and then equip that monster to this card. And this card gains attack equal to the combined original attack of all monsters equipped with this card by its effect. And if this card is sent to the graveyard while it's equipped with a monster, then you can special summon this card back from the graveyard, which is why I love playing this card as a 1-of. Plus, I love Vampire Vamp's artwork. We then play 3 copies of Vampire Scarlet Scourge. Vampire Scarlet Scourge is the best normal summon in the entire deck outside of Unizombie, because if this card is normal or special summon, you get to pay 1,000 life points and then target a vampire in the graveyard and instantly special summon it back to your side of the field. And you can only use the effect of this card once per turn, and at the end of the battle phase, if this card destroys a monster by battle, you can special summon this card, you can special summon them from the graveyard to your field, which is a very good effect just to be able to get you into, again, your Vampire Sheridan extremely easily. We then play a single copy of Vampire Shadow. Vampire Shadow is just a 1-of to me because when it's normal summon, you get to special summon a vampire monster from your hand or deck, except another copy of itself, but if you do, only that monster can attack for the rest of the turn. And this card can only be used to XZ summon a Dark XZ monster, which is not that big of a deal for the deck, but it does have a lot of drawbacks where that monster is the only one that can attack, and you can only make Dark XZs. We then play a single copy of Vampire Duke. Vampire Duke is usually the card that I special summon off of Shadow because it helps me go into my rank 5. But what this card does is when it's normal summoned, you get to special summon a vampire monster from the graveyard. And when you special summon this card, you get to declare a type, monster, spell, or trap. And your opponent sends one of the cards that you declared to the graveyard from their deck. And it can't be used except for a Dark XZ monster, which again is not the greatest effect, but it still comes in kind of handy. We then play a single copy of Fraulein. Fraulein is really good because when a monster declares an attack, you can special summon this card from your hand. In defense position, you only use the effect of this card once per turn, and once per turn, or once per battle, if a zombie monster you control battles, then during damage calculation, you can pay life points in multiples of 100 all the way up to 3,000 and make your zombie monster gain attack equal to the amount that you paid, which is a pretty good effect just to give you that added bonus on your side of the field of the attack points. And a lot of your cards like Vampire Domain will actually give you those life points back, which is not that bad. We then play 3 copies of Vampire Sorcerer. Vampire Sorcerer is the way that I'm actually normal summoning out my Vampire Voivode to my side of the field as quickly as possible. Because if this card is in your possession is sent to the graveyard by your opponent's card, either by battle or effect, then you can add a Dark Vampire Monster or a Vampire Spell or Trap from your deck to your hand. You can manage this card from your graveyard to let a Vampire Monster be normal summoned to your side of the field without tributing, which is your Vampire Voivode to your side of the field. It doesn't say normal summoning it without tributing, it just says you get to normal summon it. opponent, which is pretty good. Which is a really good effect just to be able to normal summon that monster to your side of the field. And then summoning Voivode for basically for free, just by banishing this from the graveyard, is just a really good effect. We then play 3 copies of Vampire Retainer. Vampire Retainer is really good in the deck too, because if this card is special summon, you get to pay 500 life points to add a vampire spell or trap from your deck to your hand, and if this card is in the graveyard, you can send a vampire card from your hand or facing your field to the graveyard to special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field, which is a pretty good effect just to be able to get you additional monsters, which helps you tribute summon out your Voivode to your side of the field. We then play 3 copies of Vampire Familiar, which does the exact same thing as Vampire Retainer, except it lets you add a vampire monster from your deck to your hand, which still is really good, that you basically play 6 searchers in the deck outside of your Vampire Sorcerer, which has a awesome utility in this deck. We then play 3 copies of Unizombie, because it's arguably the best card that you can ever normal summon in any zombie deck, because it lets you send a monster from your hand to the graveyard, or send a monster from your deck to the graveyard, and increase this card's level by 1, and you can increase it by 1 in multiple times, which is really nice about this card, and it's really easy to go for a lot of different plays with this card, and why I really like playing this in the deck. We then play 2 copies of Solitaire, because Solitaire can go into Unizombie really easily, and then we play double Mizuki, because you can banish a copy of Mizuki to special summon a vampire monster or a zombie monster from the graveyard, which is really good. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. I really love that effect as well about Sorcerer, that basically they kind of thought about it with this, that basically all you have to do is just banish this, and then you can normal summon this without tributing. Take 2 monsters from your opponent and then overlay those 2 monsters for Sheridan is just ridiculously good. Like, I'm surprised a lot of people are actually looking over how good Voivode actually is for going for Sheridan. So, let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Vampire Desires. Vampire Desires is pretty good because it lets you target one face-up monster you control and send a vampire monster from your deck to the graveyard. And if you do, that monster becomes the same level as the targeted monster on the field, which is pretty good to be able to kind of level manipulate the monsters on your field as the one you sent to the graveyard. And also, it lets you target a vampire monster in your graveyard, send a monster you control to the grave, and if you do, special summon the targeted monster, which is pretty good because it kind of works like Monster Reborn in a way as well. We then play 3 copies of Vampire Kingdom, because this isn't the Zombie World variant. I wanted to do a pure variant of this, and if you guys want to see a Zombie World variant, definitely comment down below. The Zombie World variant is a little bit more powerful, but a lot of you guys always request for me to do a pure variant of this, and so I wanted to start with the pure variant and then maybe go to the Zombie World variant later. Because this variant is going to stay pretty close to the same unless we get any more of zombies or vampires. And so what this card does is zombie-type monsters gain 500 attack during damage calculation. Then once per turn, when a card is sent from your opponent's deck to the grave, you can target 1 card on the field and send a dark vampire monster from your hand or deck to the grave, and if you do, destroy that target, which is a pretty good effect just to be able to pop cards and make them gain 500. We then play 3 copies of Vampire Domain. Vampire Domain gives you an additional normal summon by paying 500, and if you lose life points, you gain the life points back, which is pretty cool, because each time your vampire monster inflicts damage to your opponent, you gain the same life as they took, which is pretty good just to be able to gain the life. It kind of takes the whole aspect of vampires as your opponent loses life, you're gaining it, which is kind of neat. I really like Vampire Domain, and it's probably one of the best cards in this entire deck. We then play for the last 3 spells. We're playing 3 copies of Super Polymerization. Super Polymerization is good in any zombie deck, basically in any dark deck, because you can use this card to be able to Super Poly into your copy of Starving Venom really easily. So, that's it for the spells. I will mention you guys too, you can drop the 3 Super Polys if you want to for 3 Ash. And I really kind of was debating before this profile if I wanted to drop the 3 Super Polys for Ash. Because the Super Polys are really good, but Ash works really good with Voivode, because if there's a monster in the graveyard with the same name, it negates it, which works really nicely with Ash Blossom. So, for the rest of the cards in the deck, for the traps, we're playing a single copy of Vampire Takeover, which gets you to your field spell as quickly as possible, because if you have no cards in your field spell zone, and all face-up monster you control minimum 1 or zombie monsters, you can activate a Vampire Kingdom directly from your deck, and then special summon a vampire monster from your graveyard and face-up defense, which is a pretty good effect, just to be able to go off with a lot of your effects. It works really good with Duke. We then play 2 copies of Vampire Domination, which is a counter trap that's basically Infernity Barrier for vampires. Then when a spell or trap or monster effect is activated while you control face-up vampire, you negate the activation if you destroy that card. Then, if there was a monster, you gain life points equal to the original attack of the monster, which is pretty good. We then play 2 copies of Vampire Awakening. Vampire Awakening lets you special summon a vampire monster from your deck, but destroy it during the end phase, which is a really powerful effect just to be able to give you a free vampire on your side of the field, which can be your Voivode, it can be your copy of Vampire Retainer or Familiar, and it can be any of the vampires that you particularly need. This card has you. So, that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 2 copies of the Vampire Sheridan. Vampire Sheridan is really good because if you're going to XZ summon this card using an opponent's monster, you can treat that monster or monsters as a level 6, which is why Voivode is pretty good, because you can basically normal summon Voivode, grab 2 monsters from their graveyard, and then immediately overlay them both for Vampire Sheridan, which is really, really good. It also has the ability that once per turn you can detach a material from this card and then target 1 card your opponent controls and send it to the graveyard. And then once per turn if a monster is sent from your opponent's, or if a monster is sent from the field to your opponent's graveyard by a card effect or by a monster destroyed by battle and sent to the opponent's graveyard, you can detach a material from this card to special summon one of those monsters back to your field. So basically, you can grab 2 off of Voivode, overlay into this, and then immediately detach a material, pop a card on your opponent's side of the field, and then take a monster that was sent. So you basically just get free real estate with this card. It's really, really good for this deck, and it's a definite 2 of. We then play a single copy of Crimson Knight Vampire Braum. Vampire Braum is really cool because Vampire Braum is actually... Bram Stoker is the one who originally wrote Dracula, which is what this card is actually based on. And it's a really neat card for the deck. It doesn't come out all that often, but it's really good at reviving itself from the graveyard, which is why I play it as a 1-of. We then play a single copy of Ultimate Tzolk'in because you do play the Vampire, you play the Vampire Shadow and Vampire Duke, so it's really easy to get you a level 5 on the field. And also with the Desire, it's really easy to change the level of a monster. And Unizombies effects are not, like, you can use both of the Unizombies effects in the single turn. So you can normal summon, for example, a copy of Unizombie, activate a domain, and then get out a copy of, say, Vampire Retainer or Familiar, use Desires, increase the Vampire to 5, and then send a Vampire from deck and send a Zombie or Vampire from hand to the graveyard, increase your Unizombie to 5, and then synchro together for Ultimate Tzolk'in and set a card, and you've got a Crystal Wing with a domain on your side of the field in Tzolk'in, which is really powerful. We play a single copy of Beals because Beals is really good in this deck to be able to, as a defensive play. 1 copy of Void Ogre because it negates spells or traps, and you can summon it off of your Unizombie, or you can summon it off to Tzolk'in. 1 copy of Crystal Wing, this is the card that you're usually summoning off your Ultimaya all the time. 1 copy of Psyframe Lord Omega, because it is a zombie deck, you're trying to summon this card all the time in this deck, and it's pretty good too, to be able to go into, to rip a card out of your opponent's hand. For our Super Poly targets, we're playing a single copy of Starving Venom and a Mud Dragon, because these are really good in the deck. Since you're not playing the zombie world, we're not playing Dragon Necro Nether Soul in the deck. It's really a great card, but you don't need it because you're going to lose value out of it. It's going to take you essentially 4 cards to fusion summon into it with Super Poly if you use it and summon into it. So it's just not worth it in this particular deck to play Dragon Necro Nether Soul unless you're playing the Zombie World variant, which again, if you guys want to see that, definitely comment down below. We then play for the Link monsters, Unicorn to spin stuff, Vampire Sucker because sometimes you need the suck, IP Masquerade to help you go into Unicorn, Anaconda because it helps you go into Super Poly, and a single copy of Linkuriboh because it works with your Vampire Familiar to go into Linkuriboh on your side of the field to get you additional plays to negate your opponent's attacks. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really fun deck to play with. I love playing with vampires because this deck is really, really fun. There's really 2 cool variants of this deck, and I'm really excited to bring to you guys the Zombie World variant as well. If you guys want to see that, I would love to hear from you guys down in the comments. And Voivode really does change the way the deck plays, which is really nice for the way the deck builds, because it's really nice to still play Vampire Sorcerer in the deck because it basically can be normal summoned without tributing, which is really insane. Because the only drawback to this card is you have to have, your opponent has to have cards in the graveyard, and also you need to have your copy of Vampire Sorcerer in the graveyard to get its effect off. So it's a little bit slow to get it out, but once you summon this card, you're going to have a really easy time OTKing your opponent. So that's it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can come part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.